We have notes in the back just behind Ryan if you need them. But we are going to be in Psalm 23 tonight. Psalm 23. And it's kind of cool to study this week to week because you kind of get to follow a pattern that starts to unpack. And so Psalm 23. And I know this is kind of silly to say, but if you remember what we talked about last week, which was Psalm 22, you'll notice that there's a definite trend happening as you go through this material. So Psalm 23, and again, this week is a lot shorter, and got some devotional thoughts on the back if you want to look at those later. But what I want to do is I want to lay the trajectory that we've been on for the last few weeks. And I know it's repetitive, but sometimes you might not have been here for that one. And then other times you just need to be reminded of like, this is the pattern that the scripture's been laying out this whole time. Like there's kind of this rhythm. So we started out, we looked at Psalm 15 and 16, and you notice basically Psalm 15 through, I guess you could say 18, there's a lot of despair, there's a lot of like, hold on, and that's a bad spelling. There's a lot of like, hold on, like you can, just trust the Lord in this. Then you got to that really cool one, Psalm 19. And as you look at Psalm 19, it's the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And it's all of these little things that glorify God. All right? And so there's little things that just glorify God in ways that it's just astounding to sit back. And so Psalm 19 talks about day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night uttereth knowledge, and just all of these amazing things. And what we were doing is we were saying it was the idea of when you look at the sun, you can kind of get blinded by the glory of the sun, but you've got to remember the one who's so much more glorious than the sun, who made the sun. And so you're not blinded. You're sitting here looking, up at the sun. And some people stop right there when it comes to worship, but you've got to look beyond it to the one who made the sun. And so we see that where Psalms 15, 16, 17, and 18 are all this idea of like, I'm holding on. I'm enduring. God will come through. Psalm 19 is, okay, look at the glory of God. Look at the wonder that God is. And then we got into 20 and 21, and we kind of dealt with those as a package. And again, if you want the notes, I think they're still in the lobby. But Psalm 20 and 21 is this idea of I'm looking forward to the deliverance God's going to give, and then 21 is I'm looking back at the deliverance he gave. So we studied those two together, where we kind of unpacked that and just really reveled in the glory of look at how amazing our God is. And so 20 and 21, it's just really the wonder that comes from look at this great deliverance God gave. Now you know this, and I've said this over and over. You need to be writing down the blessings and the work that God does. Again, I was rehearsing it with some friends on Saturday night. We were sitting right here as I was filling the baptismal. And I was just going through with them. I was like, yeah, this is the cool thing God did. And this is the other cool thing that God did this last year. And oh, let me tell you the story. And I told them the story about the van that got the windows replaced. And then God totaled my other van. And it was just all the things that God did. And you're like, I would have never thought you would say that totaling a van was a blessing. But it was. And it was just one of those things where I had forgotten all of these stories until I was going back through my journal, and I was like, oh, I had forgotten all about that. And so that's why over and over, I'm going to stress with you guys, you need to be jotting down the wonders that God does, because we have very, very bad memories. Ecclesiastes brings it up and says, when you started inquiring why the older days were better, you don't even inquire wisely concerning that. Like, there's a statement some people have. It's like, you're not even wrong. Like, it's just a bad question. All right, and it's the idea of you don't remember all the bad, and you don't remember all the good. And so you're living in the now in all the suffering going, those old days were good, and I wish I could go back to those old days. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't for a moment wish you went back to those old days. But that's the idea where Psalm 21 and 20 are just reveling in what God has done and celebrating it. And so that's the trajectory we've been on. And then last week, and I realized, you know me, Psalm 22, I love the apologetic side of things. Psalm 22, I typically just lean in, straight up apologetics. Let's talk about Christ and why Jesus is the Christ. And look at this, prophesied 1,000 years ago. Okay, great. But David is writing this. He's writing it about something that he went through. He's exaggerating in his own life what he went through. Jesus, like I said, is going to fulfill it very, very, very directly, like scarily so. Like there's a reason why when Jesus is dying on the cross, one of the last things he says is the first line of that poem. My God, why have you forsaken me? Which like quite literally is, and Matthew even goes so far as to put it in the Aramaic, which would have been the first line, like Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. I probably butchered the pronunciation, but he literally writes it in there and then translates it. And then when you go to Psalm 22, you're like, and then you're reading like, upon my vesture they cast lots, and they you're like, this is ridiculous. Like, how could you not believe? And there was a reason why 5,000 people came to Christ instantaneously, because they start looking at this going, but, so, apologetics aside, but as you get to Psalm 22, it basically is this idea of reminding us one more time to hang in there. Because remember, we started off with the idea of things are going bad, all right? And so there's bad, there's suffering, there's all this. But then we said after the bad and suffering, what happens? The victory comes. And I used the term last week, vindication, which is the same idea. But the idea was, yes, there's bad and suffering. And so Psalm 22 is just a buildup of, all right, the bad stuff's coming again, but just wait, because the Lord will come through. And so the bad comes, and then there is that idea of vindication, which is, I waited on the Lord and he came through. Okay? So that's where we've been. The reason I unpack all this is because, again, week to week to week to week, we can lose track of the patterns that have been laid out across this psalm. All right? And so Psalm 15, like I said, is kind of that start of the phase. Psalm 15 is going to go very much with Psalm 24. 16 is going to go very much with 23. And it's that Jewish thing we talked about called a chiasm, which you don't need to know that term. But basically it's building up. And now we hit Psalm 23. Now Psalm 23 is a super familiar psalm. You probably know songs by it. You're like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Like, if you've ever listened to a Patch the Pirate, you've got that song in your head. All right? But look at Psalm 23, because look what it says. Psalm 23 is now, we've been through all of this stuff. And when you hit Psalm 23, it's the idea of resting in him. And next week, we're going to look at the idea of celebrating him. Because what it is you're building, you've seen God deliver, you've seen him come through, you've seen him do this great work. And there just comes a point where you have to go, like we have this compulsion to keep working and to keep pushing and to keep striving. But there comes a point where God just says, relax, like rest, take a moment. And so that's where I want to zoom in on this one tonight, because again, there comes a point where we've seen God do wonders, we've seen God come through, we've seen the stress and the trials and all this stuff, and there's a point where God comes through enough times, and now we just need to sit back and just be like, and you just kind of take that breath, all right? And I want you to see this, because it's not just laziness, it's a rest that is meditating on what he's done. So look at here, Psalm 23, verse 1. And it says this, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. All right? And the idea here is the Lord, again, the idea of a shepherd. It's that provider, that protector, that guide. I remember I was driving through the desert one time, and there was a bunch of sheep in the middle of this desert. I don't know why. Apparently they were finding something out there to eat. But we were driving in the desert, and we were just heading along this road, and there's that shepherd sitting up on the hillside, and these massive flocks of sheep, and you got all the sheepdogs running around and herding the sheep and keeping them minded. And those sheepdogs, they work on behalf of the shepherd. And I remember we're driving along, and these dogs, they're watching us. They're coming up to the car and kind of, what are you doing? And that shepherd's right there kind of keeping an eye on everything. He's got a perch where he can kind of see the whole region, and that's what's going on. He never just leaves them alone. He's always got like the sheepdog with him, or he's got something where they're protected. And that's the idea. So David is like this sheep sitting in God's pasture going, hey, where are we going to go eat now? Wait, what's going on? And he goes, the Lord is my shepherd. And the idea of I will not want anything that I need, he's going to give me when I need it. Now, that doesn't mean every single sheep out there in the field is like, I would turn down food right now if no. Like some of them might be hungry a little bit. Some of them might want a little more water. Some of them might be like, I've got a bristle on my foot, whatever. But the idea is you have everything that you need to survive. I love the passage where Jesus is doing the parable and he says, hey, if you seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things shall be added to you. And in the context of that passage, he's talking about food and raiment and the essentials. And so God promises the essentials. He says, you will have enough to survive. But I think we can all attest, he has given us much more than enough. Like he's given us abundantly above all that we could ask or think. Like, again, I was chatting with those friends of mine, and we were just kind of going through the blessings that God had given us through the years. And God has given me 4 different cars over the course of my life, which is kind of crazy to stop and think about and be like, that's 4 different cars I didn't have to buy. Like that's silly. But, and he didn't have to do that. Like there was nothing in the contract where, I accepted Christ as my Savior. I'm walking with him and he's like, remember, God, like every 4 years, I need a new car. No, like he didn't need to do that, but he did. And like sometimes he quite literally, the person who gave it to us, like drove it to us and dropped it off in our driveway. That happened at least twice, and I'm like, what is this? And so we look and we just go, you know what? There's something to be said about resting in it. We were talking about George Mueller, and again, I hope you have your own stories and you don't always have to go to someone else's story. But George Mueller's autobiography is so amazing because he still struggled with doubt. He still struggled with like, I don't know if God's going to do it again. But over and over and over, like he ran, I think it was 4 orphanages, a tract society, a Bible society. He was pastoring a church. I mean, he was doing all of that. Literally would not tell anyone what he needed. He would just pray about it. And there was a box in the back that they could put money in if they wanted to. And there were days where he's like, the box is empty. We really need money by tomorrow. And someone would be like, I forgot, I owed you money. And like literally reading his book was just astounding to just go, yeah, that's how God can work if we choose to trust him. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I hope that's something, like that's why I say we got to stop, because there's a level of resting in him that says, I'm still going to work, I'm still going to trust, I'm still going to be faithful. But there's a level of, as I am serving him and putting him first and resting in him, I just know that he's going to give me what I need. Like I'm going to hold him to it. And that's the idea here, is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But I want you to notice the second part. Again, if you look on your notes there, and I'm not going to cover every little detail of the notes, but look at it. In that the Lord is my shepherd, in that I am trusting him, it says, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. So there are times where he quite literally will bless you with protection and rest. Like he will bless you with those things. And that's the job of a shepherd. The shepherd is tasked with taking care of the sheep. It would be a pretty terrible shepherd if he was like, oops, lost a few. Like, it's his job to protect the sheep. And if God's the good shepherd, he's going to give his sheep what they need. I've run enough crews in my life, and there were times like I'd be working at camp and I'd be like, hey, I need you guys to go build me a paintball course. Because that sentence did leave my mouth at one point in my life. But go build a paintball course. And it would be silly of me to go, I'm not going to give you instructions on how or where or when. I'm not going to give you any screws. Figure it all out. No, if I am the guy telling you to go do a job, I'm going to give you the supplies, the information, all the I'm going to give you. Now, I might leave it up to your brute force to dig that hole. Okay, so go get a shovel or a post hole digger and go dig the hole. But I'm going to provide what you need. And then if I'm a good supervisor, I'm going to come by with more supplies. I might come by with water. I might come by with shade. Like, I'm not going to just brutalize you and be like, figure it out. Lousy, no good. No, like the Lord is my shepherd. He's going to bring me to the place where I need to be. He's going to give me the supplies that I need. He's going to give me the nourishment that I need. And he goes, he leadeth me beside still waters. This isn't like, there's a fire hose over there, and it's just blasting full volume. I hope you can stop long enough to get a drink. Like I worked at Ironwood one time, and we were literally working in probably 114-degree heat. And the downside they say about building a shade in the desert is it's not shaded until you finish building it. And so you're out there working in the desert, building, and they would pull up in the field with the water truck, and they would just open up the water truck and just spray water out into the field. And so we would all run out there and just get soaked and then go back to work to be immediately dry because it's the desert. But that's not what God's doing to us. He doesn't come alongside us like broadside with a water truck and go, "You guys thirsty?" Oh, and just open that thing up and just blast us in the face with a fire hose. It says he's leading me beside the still waters. He's leading me to green. Like I want us to notice these details because God is a good leader. He is kind. Now he's going to put us through things. He's going to let us go through things. Sometimes he's quite literally going to lead us, through the valley of the shadow of death. Like that is going to happen. But he's there with us, and he is giving us what we need. And the reason I want us to stop there is because this pattern that we've seen through Psalms is if we truly trust God, when things get bad, we're going to come back to the truths we know about him. And you remember from one of the previous lessons, we walked through some of the character traits of God that we could pull out of those Psalms, and we need to trust in those. Like we grab onto that. All right, and again, it's that idea. If you've ever worked at height, and you're locked in with a rope up 80 feet in the tree, and you're saying, "Do I really trust my equipment or not?" And we said the true way that you know whether you trust your equipment is you're willing to put your full weight in it and see whether it holds you up, because that's really the only way you know whether you trust it or not. And what happens through the Psalms is David is basically being forced to sit in his harness and say, "Do I trust that this harness will keep me in the tree? Do I trust that this protective gear will actually protect me?" Walt Brock, he's the director, former director, executive, whatever they call it, down at Ironwood. He founded it. Walt Brock has this. It's not unique to him, obviously. It's very like a lot of people have them. But there's a special saw that the moment you touch the saw blade, it immediately locks up and drops the saw blade into the device. So you literally, if you're using this table saw, you literally cannot cut your finger on it. And so they do this test where they take something like a hot dog and they bring the hot dog up next to the saw blade and they let the hot dog touch the saw blade, and they notice that the saw blade will immediately lock up and drop down into the table, and it won't harm the hot dog. Can you imagine, though, being the guy who is selling that product, and you have to trust that product enough to take your finger and to prove that you truly trust that that device will work the way it's advertised to work? You have to take your finger and you have to intentionally poke a moving saw blade. I'm sorry, I know in my head that would work. I know in my head that it would not cut my finger. I know in my head that there's a little device that works at the speed of like tactile feedback, however that works. I know in my head but I'm telling you, it would not be something that I would volunteer to do. It's like the first guy to test a bulletproof vest. I'm sorry. I'm like, nope, not doing it. I'll take your word for it, but I don't intend to ever get in a situation where I want to put that to the test. But what happens when we live our spiritual life, it's basically God saying, here's a bulletproof vest. Okay, cool. The bulletproof vest will protect you. Oh, cool. I'm about to shoot at the bulletproof vest. And you're like, I'm good. Or God brings you into his workshop and he goes, this is a saw that will immediately collapse the moment you touch it. Oh, that's cool. That's really neat. Yeah. And you'll never have to worry about cutting off a finger. Cool. Do you believe me? Oh, I totally believe you. Okay, now touch it. I'm sorry, I must have heard you wrong. I'm not touching that saw blade. And God's like, and he pushes your hand towards, because he's like, do you trust me or not? And there are situations where God puts us in a situation and we go, I don't like this. This is not comfortable. But that's where we have to have that knowledge of God's character to say, he's not going to cut my hand off. He's not going to harm me. Like, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He's going to give me what I need. He's going to lead me to green pastures beside still waters. But then look at verse 3 here as we continue this idea. So he's protecting us. He's giving us rest as a shepherd would. Verse 3, he restoreth my soul. Again, I use the illustration in the notes of a deep breath after a hard workout. Uh, when I was in college, I made a stupid decision and I signed up for a physical fitness class. And it was brutal. I didn't want to run laps, but they made, and normally you'd have to run a mile, in like 4 minutes or whatever. Which Caleb is laughing at this now. He's like, novice. But I signed up for this thing, and like we had to do sprints while we ran our mile, and then we had to run another mile, and it was like a 2-mile run instead of. I mean, it was just stupid. I don't know why I signed up for it, but man, like you get working out, and there comes a point where you get done, and you're just like, oh, I'm so glad that's over. And that's this idea, like you've worked your tail off, you're exhausted, you're burnt out, and He restoreth my soul. Like He comes back, and especially like, we as a church, we've been through a little bit this last year, with all the move and all the other things going on. But there comes that point when God comes through, like that time, and you're like, all right, okay, what's next? I'm going to take a breath though before we go on to what's next. I need to breathe for a moment. And it's that idea of He restoreth my soul, and it says, and He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And so these are good paths. This isn't like, oh, by the way, I'm going to throw you amongst the wicked. Like He's leading you in a good way, in a righteous way. We're going to get more into that in Psalm 24. That's kind of a big part of Psalm 24. But look at David. So verses 1 through 3 is all of this like calm and comfort and peace. And it's all good and wonderful and beautiful. And then I want you to hit verse 4. Because look at verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You're like, hold on. We just got done with green pastures, cool waters, restored my soul. And if any of you have been to my house, I collect skulls. It's weird to admit that out loud. But like you walk in and you've got some of those skulls, and you're like, okay, that's a cow skull. That's a, whatever. But I want you to imagine, like, there's one thing about walking into your pastor's house and seeing a bunch of skulls, and you wonder why he has a human skull, and you don't ask, and you just look at all those things, and you go, okay. There's one thing about seeing them in a museum, but if you're walking through the woods, and then you look over in the corner, and you just see like a bunch of bones, just kind of lying off the side of the path. I hope we would have enough survival instinct that we're walking along and we're going, I'm not comfortable, right? Like there's something off about, like you're walking along and you see this pile of bones there, and you're going, I don't think I want to be on this trail. And then you keep going up the trail and you see another skeleton, and you go, yeah, I'm not okay with this. And you keep going and you find another one and another one and another one and a pile of them, and you're just going, I don't think I'm supposed to be on this trail. Like I hope at some point we would be at that point where we're like, I don't think, like, especially if it was someone we didn't trust and they were leading us down that trail, we would go, I might have to like double check your credentials because I don't know. But if it's someone we trusted, I hope we would have the trust to go, I'm pretty sure they're not leading me down this trail to, sabotage. But look at what David is saying. He's saying, like, the Lord is my shepherd. He's so wonderful to me. Look at the calmness. Look at the peace. Look at the still waters. This place is beautiful. And then, like, you look right off the trail and you're like, what's that dark, creepy trail? He's like, we're going to walk there next. You start walking up that dark, creepy trail and it goes, there's bones everywhere. This is the valley of the shadow of death. He goes, okay, but I trust the Lord enough that when He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death, and there's just bodies everywhere, and I go, I don't know what this is all about. This is eerie, and it's spooky, and I don't like this. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, what? I will fear no evil. And so I want us to put feet to this story, because the trust we have for Him when it's green pastures and still waters and really good food should be the same trust we have for Him when He tells us, I want you to poke that movie Solid. Which, for the record, I'm not saying poke the movie Solid. All right, but if we truly trust Him the way we say we do, when He tells us to do something, we go, okay, you got a plan. You lead me in these paths for a reason. And so if you've brought me to this point, okay, I won't fear evil because I know you're there with me. It's a side note, and we'll get there in like 36 years. But look at Psalm 91. Psalm 91. Boy, if we continue at this pace, we will get there in like 30 years. But in Psalm 91, I want to show you kind of this other passage. And look at Psalm 91, because David keeps reinforcing this in his head. He goes, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge, He is my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. Surely He will deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, from the noisome pestilence. He will cover thee with His feathers. Under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be to thee a shield and a buckler." And then you see this very same language. He says, "You will not be afraid of the terror the terror by night, nor the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the noisome pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh to thee." And look, it says, "He is my refuge, the Lord Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against thy stone." And it basically is just this idea of, he shall call upon me, and I will answer him, and I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. And it's just that language that God lays out in the Psalms of, hey, I'll take care of you. I'll be with you. And sure, you might be in this place that's dangerous. You might be in this place where there is a noisome pestilence. But I'm there with you. I've never left you alone. And I want you to see that, because in Psalm 23, verse 4, it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil." Why? Because thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And so you've got the big shepherd's crook, and he guides the sheep with it. But then you've got a rod that you can beat anything off that's trying to come and attack. And so you can steer the sheep with one and whack them with another. And your rod and your staff, they're comforting, because one's kind of guiding me the way I should go and making sure I don't wander too far off the path, and the other one's protecting me. So if I really trust, this is the attitude I'll have. And then look at this. It says, "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over." And then he just summarizes, and he goes, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Okay, and so I might have walked off with it. All right, I'll just stick by the mic. All right, and so again, it's that language that he's just laying out. He's saying, hey, trust the Lord, and when these things seem to be all going just mushroom shaped, you just simply trust him and you stick to the stuff. Now, this then leads, and I'll let you do some of your own study there on the back page. But I want you to look at Romans, because Romans lays out just a really powerful thing. And I don't know exactly when we'll get to it, but I know Ryan and I are working on some of the stuff for Sunday mornings. In Romans, we'll get to it eventually. But I want you to look here at Romans chapter 11. And there's a whole lot to Romans 11. I wish I could do it justice. We just literally don't have time tonight. Romans chapter 11. And Romans chapter 11 is building on what God has done, what God will continue to do, all the work that he's done even in Israel. And you'll see just the blinding and the blessing of the Gentiles, and there's just so much there. But look at Romans 11, verse 33. Romans 11:33. And I realize we're dropping in the middle of a context, but look where it says here, Romans 11:33. He goes, "Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out." And so again, if we take the context of Psalms, the Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want. That makes sense to us. The Lord's taking care of me, everything's going good, awesome, that makes sense. Okay, he leads me by still waters, he leads me in these green fields, that makes sense. Like, he's being good to me, all's good, I'm serving him, and man, it just feels good. But then there are times where now we're in the valley of the shadow of death. Now we're around the noisome pestilence. Now there's arrows landing around us. And that's where the confusion starts boiling up. That's where I lose track of my head. Like, I'm no longer in my right mind. And that's why we have to trust the wisdom of God to go, okay, the wisdom and knowledge of God is unsearchable. And it goes, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. Like, there are going to be things that God does that do not make any sense to me. I can't, and that's Romans 11. It's all about him blinding the Jews to let the Gentiles in. And then it goes on and it goes, and if blinding the Jews brought the Gentiles in, and that was such a blessing for us, can you imagine how awesome it's going to be when he opens their eyes, and how much more blessing there will be when they are all opened in their eyes? And so, like, if Jews down here and us up here is that good, can you imagine if they get brought up here? How, like, this is going to be amazing. And that's what he's getting at in Romans 11. And then he hits this point right here going, there are going to be things to this that I have no idea how to explain. God's wisdom is amazing, and his knowledge is unsearchable, and I just have to trust him. But then look where he goes further, verse 34. For who hath known the mind of the Lord? Who hath been his counselor? Or who hath first given to him, and it shall be recompensed again? So there's going to be things that God does that we just have to go, he didn't ask me for advice. He brought me into this spot. He did this thing to me. I didn't ask, and I don't like it, but I've got to trust he knows what he's doing. It would be like waking up in the middle of a really important surgery, and you're looking down at the doctor going, I don't know why you just cut me open like that, but I don't appreciate it. And he's like, just shush. I'm doing something really important here, and this needs to come out now, or you're going to die. And you're like, I don't know, sir. All I'm saying is I'm looking, and that's supposed to be inside my body. So I'm going to need you to put that back inside. Okay, that's why they knock us out, so we don't see it happen. All right, but I think there's times where God is like doing surgery on us, and we're awake for it going, why are you doing that? I don't like what you're doing. I don't think that's the right way to go. And God's like, I didn't ask. I didn't ask your counsel. I know what I'm doing. And that's the language here. And then it goes, who hath given to him, and it shall be recompensed again. And then verse 36 is just a verse I think we all need to memorize. For of him, and through him, and to him, what? Are all things. But then you get to the end of the verse, and this is where Psalm 24 is going to come in. To whom be glory forever. Amen. And so I just want to leave you with that, because again, it's that same pattern of mind. It's that same language where if the Lord truly is our shepherd, if he truly is someone worthy of our trust, then we have to make the point to actually trust him. If he's someone who we really trust is wise enough to do all this, we have to trust his info. If he's knowledgeable enough, we have to trust his knowledge. If we do believe that he's actually in charge, then we have to trust that we need to do it his way and trust that he's actually in charge. And that's this language of Psalm 23. And then, not to cheat next week we look at when all of this happens, this is the celebration we can have. And that's where Psalm 24 comes in. And that kind of wraps up this section of the Psalms. All right, so there we go. We made it through Psalm 23. That was the longest 6 verses in the history of the world. All right, questions or comments? Just following up with Psalm 23 here. Okay, Peter?
Yeah, basically, it's just to encapsulate what you've been saying tonight, really. I think, and I refer to that great hymn tune, Trust and Obey.
Yeah.
We just have to do that all the time. And when we are feeling a bit challenged or whatever, we still have to trust and obey.
Yeah. And nothing more needs to be said. I mean, it really does. It boils it down. If you got those 2 words, trust and obey, it just takes care of the rest of it. But he keeps comparing us to sheep because we like to wander off. And that's why the shepherd takes a high road and sends all the sheepdogs out to kind of keep everyone corralled back in. All right, Martha?
Okay. When I was going over this lesson earlier, where was it? It just got the ideal to me that do I really trust God like I'm supposed to trust him? And I'm trying to remember where it was in here, but it was in the Psalm. The blessing. Oh, I think I remember. It was the one with the verse 2. The blessing of good things, not led through turbulent waters, but good waters.
Yeah.
I have to learn.
Yeah.
Because when things get hard, the first thing you think of is not hard, but when you start thinking of the bad.
Yeah.
And it's good waters. It's not bad water. He's not going to just let us go all off like that.
Yeah.
He's still holding us. He's still in control. And so it just kind of
Yeah.
touched my heart to realize, God, how have I been doing with you like that?
Yeah.
Like you said, fighting him and wake up in surgery and stuff, telling him.
Yeah, God doesn't necessarily always knock us out before he starts doing surgery. So so on that note, I think this is going to be the important thing to remember. So Psalm 23 is the idea, again, trusting God, good or bad.
Yes.
But Psalm 24 is going to be coming back and praising him all the time, especially when he's come through. And so next week, Lord willing, we're going to get into Proverbs 30. Because Proverbs 30, there's that section where it says, don't give me poverty or too much wealth. And there's actually a danger to poverty or too much wealth, because if I'm poor, I'll steal and take his name in vain. And then if I've got everything I could ever want, I'll forget it.
Yeah.
And that's where, I've listened to the testimonies of some people who have chronic illness, and they talk about, they're like, when I was healthy, I actually was not close to the Lord. And when God made me sick, and they use that language, they're like, yeah, God made me sick.
Amen.
And the reason they used it is they said, because I have never been closer to the Lord, because it's and that's where our danger is when everything goes well, we do have a tendency of going, I'm okay, I got this. And sometimes God has to kind of, no, you still need to trust me.
Yep.
Ryan? Yeah. Oh, it does. Exactly. Yeah. And so if you didn't hear what Ryan said, these mirror David's life. I mean, he starts out as a shepherd boy sitting out in the middle of that field, battling things like insane. But he learned trust, and he learned how to face those things, and he just great relationship with the Lord. But then later on in life, you notice the time when kings went out to battle, David's like, I don't need to go out. And he put himself in a situation that just kind of ruined him for the rest of his life. And I mean, quite literally, I had a pastor, like I've told you before, he did like a 20-something message series on just all the consequences of that one sin. And it was just devastating. Like the rest of David's life was all devastated by that one sin, because he was comfortable and he didn't think about what the Lord had to say. And it was it's just crazy to think that one sin, we think about David. We think about David when he was weak, fought Goliath with the power of the Lord. And the other story we all think about is David and Bathsheba. The giant he beat and the giant he didn't, All right. Any other questions or comments tonight? Those have been good.